Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. This is going to be my last timely upload to YouTube. It will not be my last upload altogether, but it will be my last timely one. From now on, I will release my uploads in the following order: Patreon, Odyssey, YouTube. You may get something on YouTube anywhere from 4 to 8 days after I've put them up on the other two. Now, my Patreon passengers are paid, and I will be preparing more statements before, because those tend to be my most impactful uploads. If God sees fit to reduce my provision, that is fine, but I will reduce my output, especially regarding anything that I do without getting paid. And I am not going to ask any one person to chip in a lot. And my Cash App supporters, shouts out to you. I really do appreciate that. Most of them have actually already subscribed to Patreon. Most of my Cash App supporters are in fact Patreon passengers as well. CJ, Brother Malcolm, to name a few. I think MLR is as well, and he is by far the most consistent. Absolutely. So it's not anything against anyone. It's a question of economy and finances and what I must do. Because I've got about 2.5 weeks left with this contract, and I don't know what's going to happen after that. In any case, I am recording this one here, not because this is a correction that we need to make right now from what I've seen. I'm recording this because I think we've actually done a good job of correcting this over the last few years, and I want to make sure that we stay on that. In other words, we slipped, we found a balance, and I want to help us maintain the balance before any further slips. Because things do change, and they can change for the better or for the worse. With that in mind, I'm telling you this. On Odyssey, I found a white supremacist devil named Shaihalu, Shyhalu, no space. Yeah, I call him a devil because many of his own kind would call him a devil. He's just one example of many of the reasons we can't take conservatism from his people, but we do need conservatism from ourselves. We are already self-correcting here in the Black Manosphere. Being nice and polite to white Manosphere men does not mean that we are going to have a type of unity with them. Admitting where we agree with each other is the same thing. We're self-correcting without their help, and I just want us to keep it that way. They employ a very deceptive strategy of telling truths for false reasons. They give facts to support false conclusions and then ignore other facts that would undermine these conclusions. So they really believe that their bitch is wrong for doing to them what they thought Sapphire was right for doing to us in their best interest. This means that they're not even our equals because their morality is less consistent than ours. They are not even as smart because their grandfathers, in many cases, were actually not the white men in whose interest slavery was from the start. Their grandfathers couldn't own slaves or land beyond an acre and maybe one slave if they were lucky. So in the end, they had to just deal with the fact that it wasn't in the interest of the planter class white men to whom their grandfathers looked up in admiration to hire their grandfathers for most jobs if they could simply pay each other to rent out their slaves with the same skills. Now, today, the grandsons of the disenfranchised white men of that era want to talk down to you and me about affirmative action that benefited white women and then every other people of color the most and us the least, and welfare that came to black women with strings attached that weren't attached for white women recipients in rural counties. Oh yeah, they want to overlook these things and may not know but wouldn't let you tell them if they don't. Additionally, another thing to remember about these conservative, white, far-right guys is that they can't for any reason learn new information, as I just stated, unless it supports white supremacy. Then they are capable of learning something new. Stats mean nothing if they don't support white supremacy, and Shahalu showed that. Now this shows you that their religion is not Christianity, it is not the Old or New Testament, it certainly is not Islam, it is white supremacy. Now Shahalu showed some stats to me, but he told me outright from the beginning that any stats I might bring were invalid automatically even before I brought any. So I decided, why bother? Now, when it comes to stats of crime and violence within and between races, as an example, he missed something. He looked at raw numbers and ignored percentages intentionally. A black man is more likely to be harmed by another black man, statistically speaking. But this goes up in poor zip codes and down in not poor areas. So when you are in the Huxtable neighborhood, you are actually very unlikely to be harmed by any civilian. And when you get into a Cosby neighborhood, Henry Louis Gates, anybody? You're more likely to be harmed by someone wearing a uniform and a badge. Because you stick out more as a black man in these areas, even if you aren't alone. See, the issue is that black men are more likely to be shot or beaten by cops, whether armed or not, than other races except for Native Americans, and this is enough to frustrate any community. And the reason that Native Americans are statistically more likely to deal with this is because their populations are already so low. So every instance of police brutality is a greater percentage of them driving that stat up. See how they don't want to critically think unless it's to support white supremacy. So even though we're not more likely to riot than whites, we are more likely to riot or march for political reasons. But we're also more likely to be blamed for riots when simply marching. Others are more likely to riot because they can get away with it. And whites are more likely to riot and destroy property because they can, and for reasons as asinine as football games or hockey games end up. So let's say if I wind up being wrong about them being more likely to riot, in any space of time, I'm still right about them being more likely to riot for reasons that are not political. And I am right about them being more likely to get away with any riots. We don't need studies for that. They'll tell you this. So they ignore these critical bits of information every time. If you educate them, it's deflection. And if you don't bother because they're too stupid, then they win the argument. Does that sound familiar at all? I mention that because it sounds to me like how hyena bitches handle disagreements too. It's almost like they were made for each other. Divestors have good reason to go for these guys, actually, as long as they have life insurance that covers murder by white supremacists, that is. They're so compatible. You remember the strategy that the sneaky, silent, decision-making white supremacists made to send in their women to neutralize us? Well, the only reason I'm not saying to send to their dumb, inbred, hick, outspoken white supremacists the hyena bitch in order to neutralize them is because she can't neutralize them. They simply kill Sapphire or Boomshika or Bonquisha when she gets out of line, like Karen does, because she wants to be Karen, so she demands to get away with the same things with which Karen gets away, and of course they're not going to have that. That is why I say it's almost like they were made for each other, but not quite. Other than that, they're very compatible. While Sapphire is trying to act like it's us rejecting who's most compatible for us, it's actually racist Cletus who's truly, literally murdering the women most compatible with him. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do y'all hear that? My bad. I thought I heard banjos playing here in Saudi Arabia. Anyway, this is why no one who is black or Muslim in either particular order should ever parrot the talking points of those inbreds who are only a few DNA molecules and 3 melanocyte cells away from not only being enslaved themselves, but deserving every bit of it. We are not the same. And I tip my hat to you in the Black Manosphere for coming to realize this even after a brief episode of slipping up and thinking that we and them were so similar and natural allies. And it wasn't that many of us that were doing it. The bulk of you did not let the few spread this idea. You understood true conservatism and the moral reasons for conservatism. They are not supposed to, conservatism True moral conservatism is not supposed to require somebody else's politics, let alone that somebody else, if they are an oppressor or colonizer or sympathizer with such, aspiring to be them. Simply put, massa just wants their views to dominate because they're massa. That's all. That being said, after this, look for the next uploads to be on Patreon first. I do encourage you to join that because I will be preparing more of what I say on there so that it will have more of an impact. Then on Odyssey, and then a few days later on YouTube. I actually would much rather get the support through Patreon, if anything, so as to spread it affordably to each and every one of you. But if every last one of you went in to the Patreon, which is cheap, then I think we'd all win in a nutshell. Because that would actually free me up to do more research and make more preparations to benefit you even more. So that would be what my request is. This way, it's actually a fair exchange instead of anything else. But to those who have just given freely through the Cash App, I really do appreciate that. Still open. When I think about it, there is somebody else who he's in the States right now, suffering, really going through it, and he didn't give me permission to say who he is. Now, there are two people, or there are two Cash Apps to which you could actually send. So I would request Patreon memberships myself. But there are two that are handling this for him because due to an injury, health impediment, and due to actually relatives taking things from him because of things that are not his fault, blaming him for an injury and the health impediment, and therefore taking things from him. He's really going through it. So the two that are taking the Cash Apps for this gentleman, for the sake of anonymity, let me look and read up the, get ready to write these down. Let me go ahead and read their Cash App tags. Let me see here. All right. One Cash App tag is D Hayes 2622. He's handling donations for this gentleman, and I lost the other one. I'm sorry, it's not coming up for me. Sorry about that, y'all. But these, but there are two. When I get the other one, I'll come back and tell y'all in the community tab, inshallah, if I remember. So for me, I'm going to ask you all to prioritize this gentleman that's hurt. On whose behalf D. Hayes is taking the donations. And for me, I'm going to ask you all to go to the Patreon. And if I get enough the more members that go on to the Patreon, the more content I'll be able to put out the more frequently. From the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind, I thank you all for flying Jet Black Airways, where Jet Black is also a verb. Come on and join the Patreon and keep Jet Black with me until the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.